With George Kittle set to miss anywhere between 3 to 5 weeks for San Francisco with a hamstring injury, don't be surprised if they turn to Jake Tonges as a receiving threat in the tight end room. When George Kittle went down most recently, for instance, against the Seahawks, he stepped up in a major way with the clutch touchdown, mossing a defensive back in the end zone. And while everyone is hyper fixating on this play, the fact is, throughout the game, he showed more than just a pair of hands as he was able to create separation consistently, as well as execute key blocks in the running game to spring the back. So in this video, we're going to dive a little bit more into the player that's potentially going to replace George Kittle for the next 3 to 5 weeks in Jake Tonges. When you turn on Tonges' film, the first thing that's really going to stand out is how he plays in big time moments. On 3rd and 3, with only a minute and 44 seconds left in the game, for instance, he made the biggest play of the game, scoring a touchdown, putting San Francisco up 17-13. And it wasn't like this play was easy or catch. First to start out, for instance, he actually fell down, continued to work his way across the end zone with Brock Purdy rolling that direction, and even with this somewhat questionable throw, he proved Brock Purdy right by mossing this defender. I mean, right here, he's literally ripping this ball out of this defensive back's hands and scoring the touchdown. And while everyone will definitely remember Tonges for that play, he overall had himself a pretty solid game, especially at creating separation. To really illustrate this point, earlier in the drive, he's running a pivot route which has him break out hard, like potentially Brock Purdy will target him in the flat before coming across the middle. And on this play, you can see how this really takes advantage of his change of direction. As soon as this defensive back comes up, Tonges breaks the other direction, and this creates plenty of room for Brock Purdy to work with, and he's even able to once again show off his great hands, and I don't know what this is, but I do like it. Another thing about Tonges, even though he's not the most athletic tight end across the league, he has the potential to be a face. Here on this play, for instance, Kyle Shanahan does a good job of creating separation by first motioning Christian McCaffrey, the defense keys in there, and then Brock Purdy is able to dump off on this little tight end screen. And if he just had a little bit better of a block right here, he might have ran for a touchdown or at least a major gain on this play. So I'm excited about him moving forward. And even when the ball didn't go his direction, I was impressed with how consistently he was able to create separation in this game. To really illustrate this point, on this play, Tonges is running a pretty deep pattern, a corner route, and as he comes out of his break, you can see how this causes his defensive back to start stumbling, and he creates a ton of separation. And while not targeted here, once one of his guys brings it down, he transitions seamlessly into a block. Speaking of blocking, an underappreciated part of Tonges' passing game in my opinion is his ability to chip defensive ends before releasing into the pattern, which I think helps the tackle just be a little bit more effective on every play. To really illustrate this point, on this play, Tonges is running an out pattern, and while it would be easier for him just to run the out pattern and not chip this defensive end at all, he decides to chip him, and you can see how this slows him down and gives Colin McKivitz enough time to reach his set point. And while this may seem trivial to some, to me it shows a player with a deep understanding of what's required to be an effective tight end in Shanahan's system. And it's not just in the passing game where he impressed me, but also in his run blocks he was able to execute throughout this game. On this inside zone, for instance, San Francisco's offensive linemen are stepping towards the play side, with Trent Williams attempting to make his way up to the second level, meaning Jake Tonges is responsible for hook blocking this defensive end. And despite being outweighed on this play, Tonges does a nice job with his initial step, getting a 45-degree angle to cut off this defensive end from the play. Then he establishes double underhooks, flips his hips, and creates a clear running lane for Christian McCaffrey to run behind. And even with him trying to disengage from Tonges' blocks, he's unable to because he has such a strong grip here. Outside of his hook blocks, I also think Tonges does a nice job of routinely making his way up to the second level, and while not the most powerful blocker, routinely he will get enough of the defender to spring runs. On this toss to Brian Robinson, for example, initially he tries to down block on this defensive end, but because he is slanting away from this play, quickly he adjusts his plan and makes his way up to the second level and gets enough of this linebacker to really spring this run all over the field, which helps him build up his momentum, so once it is snapped, he's able to make his way up to the second level. And like we've already seen in this video, once he does make his way up to Seattle's secondary, he shows off great technique. He's mirroring this defensive back, and finally, once he does get close enough, he's able to establish double underhooks, and at that point, the game's over for this defensive back. He's not going to be able to disengage. With all these positives to Tonges' game though, the fourth-year tight end was an undrafted free agent, so he does have some clear areas of concern. With probably the most notable in my opinion at being his non-ideal measurements. While he does come in at 6'4 and 3/8, weighing 240 pounds, he ran his 40-yard dash in a modest 4.77 seconds, his 10-yard split was 1.62 seconds, and he wasn't the most powerful tight end, only putting up the bench press 17 times. In other words, unlike a player like George Kittle, who often has massive yards after the catch and has long touchdown runs, Tonges may be caught from behind. Another thing you'll notice on this film, while he is a willing blocker and often has solid technique, he's not always able to generate the necessary power to drive a player outside of the play, and in his pass protection, he does concern me in his anchoring. It's also worth noting back in 2023 when he was playing with the Bears, he was placed on IR, so headed forward, he needs to prove he can remain healthy at the NFL level. Even with these concerns though to Tonges' game, overall when I'm looking at him as a player, I think he's a perfect replacement for George Kittle, especially in the receiving game, at least for the next 3 to 5 weeks. Not only did he show he had ice running through his veins, as well as glue for hands on his touchdown grab against that defensive back, throughout the game he created steady separation, and in the running game, he showed the ability to execute hook blocks at a high level as well as make his way up to the second level consistently throughout the game. And while he does have some areas of concern, for the next couple of weeks, expect to be seeing a lot more Tonges, and I expect him to perform well. But ultimately, these are just some of my thoughts on the undrafted free agent out of Cal who went from 0 catches in his NFL career to arguably making the biggest play in the Seattle game. And now, I want to hear your thoughts about him as a player. Do you think he'll be able to replace George Kittle at least for the next 3 to 5 weeks? Or do you think San Francisco should go ahead and sign another tight end? It would also mean a ton to me if you did enjoy this video, if you could go ahead and like and subscribe. It truly helps out the channel a ton. And as always, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.